In lecture number 1 from the chapter Metals and Nonmetals, we are going to study about the physical properties of metals, the physical properties of nonmetals, and chemical properties of metals as well as nonmetals. So let's get started. As far as the physical properties of metals are concerned, we have been studying this since the very junior classes, maybe grade 6 onwards. So what's new in class 10? We already know the physical properties that metals are solids, metals are hard, they have a metallic luster, that is, they have a really nice shine on them. They are malleable, which means that they can be beaten into sheets. They are ductile, that means they can be drawn into wires. They have high melting points. They have high boiling points also. They are good conductors of heat. They allow current to flow through them very, very easily and smoothly. They are good conductors of electricity and they are sonorous. What is meant by sonorous? That they produce a ringing sound if we strike against them. So in class 10, nobody is going to ask you the physical properties of metals. So why are we studying it here? You'll be asked the exceptions to these properties. So if you look at the slide in the brackets, you will find the exceptions. All metals are solids except mercury because mercury is a liquid at room temperature. Similarly, all metals are hard except lithium, potassium and sodium, which have comparatively lower melting points and they are soft. You can even cut them with a knife. Metals have a metallic luster, malleable, ductile. These are general properties and we don't have many exceptions to them. Yes, metals have high melting points, but gallium and cesium, you place them on the palm of your hand and they melt. Their melting point is so low that with your body heat, they can melt. Then good conductors of heat. The best conductors are silver and copper, but lead and mercury, they are poor conductors of heat. Also, as far as electricity is concerned, silver is the best conductor of electricity that we have. Likewise, physical properties of nonmetals. Nonmetals may exist as solids, liquids, or gases. That means they can exist in any of the three physical states. Examples of solid nonmetals are carbon, sulfur, phosphorus. Examples of liquid nonmetals are bromine, which exists as a liquid at room temperature. And there are so many gaseous nonmetals around us, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen being some of them. Then nonmetals are generally soft, they are brittle, but diamond, which is the hardest substance known, is a allotropic form of carbon, which is a nonmetal. Nonmetals also do not have a metallic luster, but yeah, there is one nonmetal which does shine, and that is iodine. Crystals of iodine are violet in color and they have a metallic shine in them. Then nonmetals are non-malleable. You cannot make sheets out of them. They are non-ductile. You cannot make wires out of them. Nonmetals, which are solids and liquids, they have low melting points, whereas nonmetals, which are solids and liquids, also have low boiling points. Also, nonmetals are poor conductors of heat. They are bad conductors of electricity except for graphite, which is again an allotropic form of carbon and it allows current to flow through it, due to which it is used widely for making electrodes. Also, nonmetals are non-sonorous. They do not produce a ringing sound when you strike anything against them. So these are the physical properties of metals and nonmetals. Once again, I will stress that yes, please lay special emphasis on the exceptions when you're learning all these things. Next comes in the chemical properties of metals. There are many different chemical properties of metals. So we'll be taking them up one at a time. The first property that we are going to talk about here is the reaction of metals with oxygen. So metals, they always react with oxygen to form metal oxides. You can see a few equations on your screen which are examples. Like when you heat copper, it combines with oxygen that results in the formation of copper oxide. Similarly, when aluminium is heated in the presence of air, it combines with oxygen to form aluminium oxide, which is Al2O3. Sodium combines with oxygen forming sodium oxide, that is Na2O. Then sodium oxide, if you further hydrolyze it, that is if you add it to water, you get sodium hydroxide, which is a base. Likewise, potassium oxide is formed when potassium combines with oxygen, and when this potassium oxide is added to water, you get potassium hydroxide, which is a base. So what do we understand from this? Metals react with oxygen to form their oxides, and when those oxides combine with water, they get converted to metal hydroxides, and all these hydroxides are basic in nature. So sodium hydroxide, potassium hydroxide, we have already studied the chapter acids, bases and salts, and we know that both of these are strong bases. So that helps you to identify that, okay, metal oxides are basic in nature. We'll be talking about some activity using which we can experimentally prove this in the coming up part of the same video. Let us now understand what are amphoteric oxides. So there are some metal oxides which show both acidic as well as basic properties. Or you can say that they react both with acids and bases. Such oxides of metals are known as amphoteric oxides. So you need to remember two amphoteric oxides, that is aluminium oxide and zinc oxide. The formula for aluminium oxide is Al2O3, and the formula of zinc oxide is ZnO. So these are two metallic oxides which are amphoteric in nature. You can prove this with the help of the equations. So aluminium oxide reacts with HCl, that is an acid, to form aluminium chloride and water. Likewise, aluminium oxide also reacts with sodium hydroxide, which is a base, and forms sodium aluminate and water. So this shows that aluminium oxide can react both with acids and bases, and that is the reason why we call it as an amphoteric oxide. Now let us discuss an activity showing that metal oxides are basic in nature and non-metal oxides are acidic in nature. In this activity, the first activity is about the burning of magnesium ribbon. We have already discussed this activity when we were doing chapter number 1, chemical reactions and equations. And we know that magnesium ribbon needs to be cleaned with a sandpaper before we burn it, because there's a layer of oxide on it that might prevent it from burning completely. So cleaned magnesium ribbon has to be taken, and then it has to be introduced into a flame using a pair of tongs. So when we do this, a white ash is obtained, because magnesium ribbon, it burns with a dazzling white light and gets converted to a white ash, and that white ash is actually magnesium oxide. When we mix magnesium oxide in water, we get a solution of magnesium hydroxide. Now we will test this solution with a litmus paper. When we add red litmus to it, we will find that the color of the red litmus paper changes to blue, showing that the nature of this oxide is basic. So that is how this activity helps us to identify that metal oxides are basic in nature. In a similar way, we can take a non-metal. In this activity, we'll be using sulfur powder, and we will burn sulfur powder in a test tube, or you can put it in a spoon, deflagrating spoon, and heat it on a flame. You'll find fumes coming out. So the fumes that come out are the fumes of sulfur dioxide. You will hold an inverted test tube over the spoon so that the fumes, they get collected in the test tube, and then you'll add some water to the test tube and give it a shake so that the fumes, they mix with water. When you do this, sulfur dioxide and water will mix with each other, or you can say they will react with each other to form sulfurous acid. So this is not sulfuric acid. Look at the formula, it's H2SO3, that is sulfurous acid, and we know that acids, they turn blue litmus to red. So in this situation, when you'll use litmus to test the nature of the solution, you will find that the color of the blue litmus would change to red, showing that the solution is acidic in nature. So this activity helps you to prove that metal oxides, they are basic in nature, whereas non-metal oxides, they are acidic in nature. Now all metals do not react with oxygen at the same rate, because it all depends on how reactive the metal is. Metals like potassium and sodium, which are highly reactive and they lie at the top of the reactivity series, they tend to react with oxygen even at room temperature, the moment they come in contact with oxygen, they will catch fire. And that is the reason why they are stored in kerosene. It is meant to cut off their contact with oxygen. Then magnesium, aluminium, zinc and lead. These metals, they are moderately reactive. They combine with oxygen at room temperature, but the reaction is not very vigorous. They don't catch fire. Instead, a layer of oxide is formed on the surface, which prevents further oxidation of the metals. So this helps because we all use aluminium utensils in the kitchen for cooking food. And we know that aluminium is quite reactive. So how can we safely use aluminium for cooking our food? Because the layer of aluminium oxide that is present on the surface of aluminium utensils prevents the direct contact of aluminium with the food, and thus because aluminium is not coming in direct contact with the food, our food is safe. You can observe the aluminium foil also. You will find that one side is shiny while the other side is dull. So the dull side of the aluminium foil is used where you keep the food and then you pack it. The reason being, the dull side is the oxidized side of the aluminium foil. Iron, it glows with a red light if you heat it in the presence of air. But if you use iron filings and you sprinkle them on a flame, they will burn out. Copper on heating doesn't burn, but it gets a black coating on its surface, and the black coating is a layer of copper oxide. Silver and gold, they do not react with oxygen at any temperature, and that is the reason why we use silver and gold for making ornaments, because they stay the way they are. They are the inertest elements or the most non-reactive elements or metals that we have, and that is what makes them expensive also, and that is what makes them suitable for making jewelry also. The second chemical property of metals and non-metals that we are going to talk about here is how do metals react with water. So when metals react with water, they form metal oxides or metal hydroxides along with the evolution of hydrogen gas. So always remember, whenever metals will react with water, hydrogen gas will be given off. Again, the extent of the reaction or the how fast the reaction will happen depends on the nature of the metal. The more reactive a metal, the faster the reaction will be, or the more vigorous the reaction will be. Like sodium and potassium, highly reactive metals, they will react violently even with cold water and form sodium hydroxide and potassium hydroxide along with the evolution of hydrogen gas. Now these reactions are highly exothermic. A lot of heat is given out and hydrogen is an inflammable gas, so it catches fire at the mouth of the test tube. So when the gas is coming out from the test tube, you will see a flame on the mouth of the test tube, which is because the hydrogen that is being evolved has caught fire. Calcium reacts with water, but the reaction is not as vigorous as sodium and potassium. It forms calcium hydroxide, hydrogen gas is also given out, but it does not catch fire because the reaction is less exothermic as compared to what it is with sodium and potassium. Also, the bubbles of hydrogen evolved. They stick to the surface of calcium metal and they act as a parachute, and they bring up the metal on the surface that causes calcium to float on the surface of water. Magnesium reacts only with hot water because it's even less reactive than calcium and forms magnesium hydroxide and hydrogen gas along with the evolution of heat. Other than that, aluminium and iron along with zinc, they react only with steam. So in this case, the form of water that we have used is the gaseous form of water because it's in the form of steam. And again, hydrogen gas is given off and aluminium is converted to aluminium oxide, whereas iron is converted to iron oxide. So both these reactions are extremely important for your exams. You generally get one out of these in the exams. Again, metals like lead, copper, silver and gold, they do not react with water at all. Again, this is what makes them suitable for making jewelry. The third property is reaction of metals with acids. Metals, they react with dilute acids, resulting in the formation of a corresponding salt, and again hydrogen gas is given off. So look at the equations. Magnesium reacting with HCl will give magnesium chloride and hydrogen. Aluminium with HCl would give aluminium chloride. Zinc with HCl would give zinc chloride, and iron with HCl would give iron chloride. Again, Reactivity depends upon how reactive the metal is. Magnesium, being the most reactive, will evolve the maximum amount of hydrogen gas. So you can see maximum number of bubbles coming out. Aluminium is comparatively less reactive. So bubbles will be there, but comparatively less in number. With zinc, it would be even more less, and it would be the least with iron, because that is the least reactive out of the four metals that we have on the screen as of now. Copper, silver and gold do not react with dilute HCl. Now, what if we take H2SO4 instead of HCl? Let's say we take a reaction of magnesium with sulfuric acid. Then what should be the products? Now, in this case, the corresponding salt would be magnesium sulfate and hydrogen gas would be given off. So remember, the salt would depend upon which acid you have taken. What about nitric acid? Do you think with nitric acid also hydrogen gas is given out? No. That is again a very important question. Why don't metals liberate hydrogen gas when they react with dilute nitric acid? The reason is nitric acid is a very strong oxidizing agent. And being a strong oxidizing agent, it oxidizes the hydrogen and converts it into water, and itself gets reduced to oxides of nitrogen. So I have an example in the form of an equation so that you can understand it better. Like when we make copper react with nitric acid, we get copper nitrate, that is the corresponding salt. But instead of hydrogen, we are getting water, because nitric acid has added oxygen to the hydrogen and converted it to water, and itself it has got converted to nitrogen dioxide. There are two exceptions to this: magnesium and manganese. These are two metals which can liberate hydrogen even with very dilute nitric acid. So this is important, you need to know the exceptions. Plus this is a very important question: why hydrogen gas is not liberated when metals react with nitric acid? The next property is reaction of metals with metal salt solution. You have already studied this earlier in the form of displacement reaction. So a more reactive metal has the tendency to displace a less reactive metal from its salt solution. Like magnesium can displace copper from its salt solution, forming magnesium sulfate and copper. Zinc can displace copper because zinc is more reactive than copper. Iron can also displace copper because iron is more reactive than copper, forming iron sulfate and copper. You can have a clear view with the help of the images on your screen. The solution in this test tube is blue in color because we know that copper salts are blue in color. We add magnesium powder to it and the blue color disappears. Why? Because magnesium has displaced copper, resulting in the formation of magnesium sulfate, which is colorless, and you can see the copper has settled down at the bottom of the test tube in the form of brown deposits. Similarly, if you put an iron nail in a test tube that's filled with copper sulfate, again copper sulfate is blue in color. Iron will displace copper, resulting in the formation of green colored iron sulfate, and you can see the deposits of copper on the iron nail as well as at the base of the test tube. So you can understand displacement reactions with the help of reactivity series, which we have already done in chapter number 1 also. So for your quick reference, I have it here for you. Going from top to bottom, the reactivity of the metal decreases, and if you want to identify whether a particular displacement reaction will happen or not, you can see whether the metal is above the corresponding salt metal or is it below. If it lies above, then it's more reactive and the displacement reaction will take place. But if it lies below the metal that is present in the salt, in that case it's less reactive and the displacement reaction will not take place. So this is all about this video. In the next video, we'll be talking about equivalent bond formation, which is the second part of this chapter.